St. Paul lived in the first century when the dominant religions were all pagan. Pagan religions were based on the belief in the power of the external rituals. These sometimes consisted of sacrifice in which animals were slaughtered, grain were burnt, or wine was poured out. They also sometimes consisted of ritual dances, prayers, songs of similar actions. In every case, however, the power of the worship, its supposed ability to convince the false god to send blessings on the worshipper, depended on the exact performance of the ritual. It was like a gymnastics routine in the Olympics. If the ritual wasn't performed with perfect precision, the worshipper would get a bad score and the gods would either ignore the prayer or get angry. This pagan focus on external rituals had also seeped into Jewish practices at the time. Throughout his writings, therefore, St. Paul is constantly warning the early Christians against falling into ritualism. He's training the early church to have a close, personal relationship with God, not a cold, distant relationship clogged with empty formalities. This is why he writes to the Romans, as we just heard, "Offer your living bodies as a holy sacrifice, truly pleasing to God." In other words, the Christian's relationship with God isn't reduced to a few rituals and prayers. Everything we do is meant to be worship. Our actions, our words, our decisions, the very way we live our daily lives. All these things are ways for us to show that we love Christ and want to follow him. Our faith is built on a personal friendship with the one true God who became man in Jesus Christ. The saints of the church are great examples of people who can show us how to live our lives as a holy sacrifice. Unfortunately, a lot of non-Catholic Christians have trouble understanding our devotion to the saints. Some non-Catholic think that the statues of saints in our churches are there because we worship them as pagans used to do. They would worship a sacred statue or an ancestor as if they were divine. Devotion to the saints is different. We use images of saints for the same reason that we use family photographs, to remind us of some of the great members of our Christian family who have gone before us. Their example of their faith, their courage, which the image reminds us of, is meant to inspire us to strive for holiness too. So we don't worship statues, but we don't worship saints either. We know that they are normal, everyday people just like us, not gods. They had their own personality flaws, family problems, and plenty of headaches. But they allowed God's grace to touch those things and sanctify them. They recognized that God's offer of friendship in Christ was able to make them not only better churchgoers and prayers, but also better husbands and wives, lawyers, carpenters and nurses, and so on. They followed St. Paul's advice, trying to make every activity of their day, whether folding laundry or cooking a meal, into a living sacrifice of spiritual worship. We aren't superstitious, nor do we believe in good luck charms, but we do recognize that when God comes into a life, he has the power to fill every little nook and cranny of it with everlasting meaning if we let him. Our relationship with God is not based on external rituals, it's based on an internal identity. This truth can help us understand one of life's great mysteries, the cross. Jesus said to his disciples in today's gospel, and he says it to us today, "If anyone wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself and take up his cross and follow me." Jesus doesn't promise that following him will lead to a problem-free life. That's what all the pagan religions claim to offer. They say that the right rituals, charms, and spells will remove life's sufferings from your agenda. But that is an empty promise. In this fallen world, no one can avoid suffering and loss. Sin, both original sin and personal sins, has turned life on earth from a garden of paradise into a battlefield between good and evil. But Jesus promises at the end of history, the battle will come to its conclusion, and he will wipe every tear and put an end to evil, suffering, and death. But in the meantime, he doesn't save us by taking away the cross. He saves us by taking up the cross. Jesus showed his love for the Father and for us by voluntarily suffering and dying on the cross, paying the price for our sin. When we unite our suffering to his through faith and prayer, we plug into his own saving love. This gives our crosses internal meaning, even though externally they remain painful. Our crosses too then become part of the living sacrifice and spiritual worship that pleases God and spreads God's grace. But often when life's crosses are especially heavy, it's hard for us to remember this. Many times it is the comfort and support of other people. We are all called to help each other carry our crosses. Jesus didn't let us suffer alone. He came and walked beside us through the incarnation, comforting, strengthening, and inspiring us with his example of self-sacrificial love. And through the Eucharist, he actually walks with us, letting his strength become our strength when we receive him in Holy Communion and in spiritual communion for those at home. We must do the same for others. When family members, co-workers, or neighbours find themselves bending under the weight of a heavy cross, we must be Christ for them, reminding them that God's love is real, that Christ has given meaning to their suffering. We are the ones who must help them continue to pray when their faith is wearing thin. We are the ones who must comfort the sorrowful, visit the sick and in prison, counsel the confused, and show the face of God to those who are having trouble finding it. The more we help those around us carry their crosses, the more Christ-like we become, and the more Christ himself will be able to help us carry our crosses.